Hello and welcome to Audiovisual Cultures, the podcast that explores different areas of cultural production. I'm Paula Blair and I'm delighted to be joined in this edition by Amy Jones to talk about her work as a costumier and designer and maker of bespoke clothing. Many thanks to supporters at patreon.com/avcultures. Please listen to the end for more ways to donate and get in touch. For now, enjoy this really illuminating discussion with Amy.
My name's Amy Jones and I am the founder of the Artwear Emporium, which offers a bespoke clothing service, specifically a sustainable clothing service as well. And then I am also a freelance costume designer and maker. I find it's important both financially and then also in terms of inspiration to have two main areas that I work in, and I find one often tends to influence the other quite a bit and stops me getting sort of in a rut in terms of design, really, because I find with a creative subject as such, you've got to be able to give it space to grow and yourself space to grow as well. Otherwise you can suddenly end up you're a design hen on a chalk line and you've been very sort of restricted for a long time. I've always been drawn to period clothing and vintage clothing in general. I find that often inspires the modern pieces which I design, and then also sometimes depending on the production that I might be designing or making for, you can really go to town and do some sometimes really authentic sort of period stuff as well. It's all corsets and bustle dresses and really fun stuff like that and everything.
Do you have a particular specialism or a favourite area that we could maybe dig into first? Or do you love all your children equally?
I suppose, irrespective of what I'm designing and what I'm making, the core aspect which really usually interests me is the textile. And it tends to be what informs the design, really. There's nothing I love more than going to fabric warehouses and feeling all the way along all the different fabrics and holding up and seeing how they move and they drape, and 9 times out of 10 it is the textile which inspires what it's going to turn into. For instance, next year I'm planning to move into a van and live in a van and have my studio still.
Wow.
Yes, I'm learning to drive. It's a little bit scary. But before I'd even thought of the size of van I wanted or anything like that, the first thing I saw was the fabric which I wanted for the upholstery.
Okay.
In fact, it's just up in the box up there and everything. I was like, oh, it'd be perfect, forget the fact I can't drive, I'm not sure if this is the way of life for me. No, I found the fabric, it must be right.
It goes from the fabric.
It always starts from the fabric.
Excellent way to start. That's fascinating.
Whether it's how it feels or how it looks, sometimes both. I've been known to walk past even charity shop windows sometimes. There can be a mannequin with a top way in the shop and there's something about it that catches my eye. One time it was a silk top and it was a really unusual colour combination. It was that kind of slightly pink, slightly brown, mink sort of colour that you get combined with a copper oxide green. And it's a colour combination I don't see very often, but it was literally just out the corner of my eye. I was just like, what is that? I must go and investigate and everything.
For that then, it's both how it looks and how it feels, as you say.
Yes.
And there's something about with what you're doing with the costuming, it's so bodily as well, so it's not just with the hands, that tactility, it's how it feels actually on the body.
It is, yes. Yeah. And often I'm not really much of a fan of the 2 dimensions. Okay. As you will see personally, as you are now, on my work table, I'm working on designs for the Snow Queen, which Northumberland Theatre Company are taking on tour from the end of November. And it's unusual for me to actually put full designs down on paper to communicate to someone else. Usually I'm just communicating to myself. It's a quick sketch on the back of an envelope and let's get on the stand. Really, I prefer to work in 3 dimensions, really, to sort of hash out the idea rather than try and work it out in 2 dimensions. I find I can work better with the fabric because I like to sort of, I don't know, it sounds a bit strange, but collaborate with the fabric, really. Like, I make some decisions, but actually it makes a certain amount of decisions as well. And I find that's one of the things that stops me getting too much in a design rut as well. I'm not actually fully in control of the process, but that's okay, really. And, you sort of start moving the fabric around and it sort of says, no, I don't want to go there, it doesn't feel right, oh, let's go the other way then. And then you sort of see some lovely folds and it starts to sit how you want it to sit, and sometimes it alters the design from initially what you had in mind, and you think, oh, fabric, you can do this much better than I can. No, you know what you're about, and you know, and you learn from the fabric as you work with it as well.
It'd be interesting to think about this. So you're working on costumes for theatrical productions.
I am, yes.
But you also make bespoke clothing.
Yes.
So you're dealing very much with people's identity and their presentation and that sort of thing.
Very much.
And how much is there a collapse between how people perform themselves in their everyday life and people having to wear costumes that are very maybe flamboyant or have to have some sort of meaning in a theatrical performance? Do you find there's a slipperiness between those, or do you think they inform each other a bit? Maybe I'm just probing too hard on that. It's just an interesting idea.
I think it's a similar thought process that goes through both. With the bespoke clothing, it's more sort of in terms of day-to-day life or an event that somebody wants it for, whereas obviously with theatre side of things, it's a character that you've been given rather than your own character. But I would say there's a similar thought process that goes through both, even though the outcome is often very, very different. One of my tasks as a designer is to, whether it's getting it out of the individual because it's a bespoke contract between the two of us, or digging information out of directors, which is not easy, often because they don't even quite know what they want until you've put it in front of them. They go, yes, or maybe not, and everything. So, yes, it's teasing out that information, really, out of either party, really, to distill what they want from the garment, which will portray the character.
How do you go about designing costumes? Would you be doing it for the whole cast? Or is there a team of people doing it?
For this particular production that I'm doing, it's quite a small production. So I am the entire costume team.
Right.
Yes. I have the option to have some freelancers come in if I need extra pairs of hands. But basically I'm a one-woman band on this one, which was a little unexpected. There was a little bit of a miscommunication at first between myself and the set designer and everything, and both of us were pretty sure that she was doing all the design and I was doing the making for the costume. Turned out not, so that sort of changed the dynamic. But in some ways I prefer that. There's just a bit more consistency in terms of you're not having to wait for the designs to get to you and everything before you can crack on with the making of them. So time-wise, that helps quite a lot. Yes, it's quite a small cast. It's only 4 actors and there's probably about 11, 12 parts between them. So the challenge is, because Northumberland Theatre Company tend to tour around small rural areas and it's small theatres which they're, or usually like community centres, so you haven't got big wings and spaces for people to change and everything. So they tend to, the actors who aren't in that particular scene, they come off the stage, they're at the sides of the audience and they just change there, sit down, watch whatever's going on and then go back on again when it's their time to go back on. It's interesting having to take that into account with the design process, because you can't have them stripping off at the side of the stage. You know, it might somewhat distract the audience. So yes, they're all having to have a base costume and then transform in terms of what they're adding on for that particular character, which they're going on.
So that must be a big thing to factor in, is how quickly can they get out of something and into something?
Yes, indeed. And they haven't got anybody to help them either with it. In fact, the Snow Queen's dress is the one which is the biggest challenge with that, because I'm intending it for it to be 3 costumes combined into one, and you lift layers of it and you change into a different character just to get that sort of magical aspect and everything. So it's going to be quite weighty, but in terms of changing and everything, she's got to be able to get in and out of it herself, and relatively quickly as well. I read a few years ago that the RSC get around this problem by using magnets.
Oh, okay.
Which is very handy, and I'm going to nick that idea, basically, because corsetry lacing would take too long, hooks and eyes would take too long, Velcro's very noisy, zips can get stuck, buttons can take too long as well. So you have to have something which will hold the dress how you want it to sit nice and fitted, but you can literally peel it off and take it off straight away.
Wow.
So it's finding those kind of solutions really which work well with the design, which is often the challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah, and being a maker actually informs the design process, I find. I find for quite a few years I've strayed away from being a designer because I haven't felt that I've had enough knowledge in terms of the making process. And it is true, the more you make, the more you learn about different shaping techniques, what works, what doesn't. I'm just at that point I'm feeling more confident to get into the design side of things because I'm feeling I'm going to design things which will actually work rather than someone gives you this crazy sketch and you're just like, well, how are you going to get in and out of it?
Yes.
Or are we just putting her in and staying for the rest of time in there? So these sort of practical aspects have to come into it as well.
That's it, yeah. And it's something that audiences wouldn't really think about very much. So it's really nice to hear some of the details of how it's all done.
Indeed.
And the clever ways that it can be done. I suppose then another thing that would probably be with both theatrical costumes and everyday clothes is durability.
Yes, very much so. I mean, I had a design meeting last week with the director and the production designer as well, and they said, please make them durable because we're going on tour with these. I was like, right, double stitching all round. I did some work for Scottish Ballet at one point.
Lovely.
Apparently a ballet dancer can rot through elastic in 3 weeks. It literally disintegrates into powder just because they're sweating so much into the costumes. So when you're working on a ballet production, if you're a wardrobe assistant, there's a lot of repairs that need to go on quite often. So that was quite interesting.
Would you stay on the books then for the full term of a production if you're the maker and the designer then, if you need to do repairs, or does somebody else?
Usually it depends on the size of the production. Quite often you have making wardrobe and you have running wardrobe. So the making wardrobe do all the making and the designing and everything, and then as the run starts they hand the whole lot over to running wardrobe and they have to do the repairs and the cleaning and make sure it's all organised ready for the run basically. The production which I'm working on at the moment, it's quite a small company. In this case, the actors and the stage manager are in charge of their costumes for the run. And it's quite a small cast as well, so that's quite manageable. I'm taking that into account in the design process. All of the actors will have a basically cotton t-shirt and leggings or cotton t-shirt and trousers underneath, and that will be what gets washed regularly, and they'll probably have 2 sets of that just in case they're doing a show one night and a show the next night, or a matinee and an evening, just depends. So they'll have 2 sets each, so you can get through that, and then everything else that kind of goes on the top doesn't need to be washed really, so that helps in terms of work during the run and in terms of durability as well. If you're not having to put something through the washing machine every night, it's going to be more durable as well.
Gosh, it's a lot to think about.
It's quite a bit. Yeah, and as the cast and size of things get bigger and bigger and bigger, you know, that's why you need armies of people, you know. It's great watching stuff like Downton Abbey, for example. When the credits come up, there's 3 pages of costume, sort of team and everything. It's like, goodness, it's like a small army to get this lot up and going.
Do you get inspiration from watching a lot of things like that?
I do, yes. The 2 that I watched most recently I found inspired me quite a lot were one called Gentleman Jack.
Oh, right.
Yes, I don't know if you watched it when it was on.
I haven't seen it, but I know of it.
Oh, yeah, it was beautifully done. And actually they did a historical period which you don't see very often. You've got the Regency period, Jane Austen, all the dresses which are kind of just under bust and then flowing down, that sort of classical style. But this is just after that. And the waistlines have gone down again, and you've got these big leg of mutton sleeves and these full skirts, but you haven't quite got into crinolines yet, which is more Victorian. It's that bit right in the middle, basically, of that century, just before Victoria comes to the throne. It's not actually a period which visually I like very much, but since watching that, it was beautifully done. The cut and the fit and the choice of colouring and the locations and the dressing of the rooms, it all worked really, really well. Someone really paid a lot of attention to it. And then the other thing was, it was the Red Princess or something like that. It was Catherine of Aragon in the years before she married Henry VIII. You really see a sense of different age groups and different cultures coming into that, because she came over from Spain. So she's wearing a Spanish farthingale, which is a very different style to what was being worn in Britain at that time, and that really made her stand out. But then you have the grandmother patriarch of the whole family, Margaret Beaufort, and she's very much in old sort of more a medieval style, sort of pre-Tudor style, more sort of long robes. So it's nice seeing the differences of nationality and then also the differences of age come into the costume as well. Something I'm watching now is also Regency, but the old woman in the play, she's wearing more late 18th century, so with your fitted bodice and your full skirt rather than the waistline coming up to under bust. I think it makes a very well-rounded production because you, even as you get older, you tend to gravitate more to what you wore when you were a young woman or in your middle years. You sort of, I've noticed that with doing bespoke as well. People find a style, I suppose, somewhere between 25 and 40, depending on if they have children, if their figure changes, because that will often change their style in terms of what they choose for themselves. But if their figure mostly stays the same for the most part, they tend to have fixed on what they like for themselves around about 30. I've noticed.
I suppose then that's back to that question of identity and feeling at what point of your life do you find I'm me now, and then holding on to that.
Yeah.
And I feel like I suppose socially we have this sense of when you get older you're supposed to dress like an older person, but if your body has aged but you still feel like the younger you, dress like that.
Yes.
You know, is that something that you...
Well, my target market is mostly women who are 40 plus, who look at the high street and go, I don't feel very comfortable wearing that now. It was fine when I was in my 20s and even in my 30s, just about. But no, it feels too young, the necklines are too low, the hemlines are too high. It's just not what I want to wear. But then they look at the brands and they find actually the styling is virtually the same, it's just the price tag is higher. And then you look at M&S, which is fine for when you're walking the dog or you're in the garden, but it's not what you sort of yearn to wear in terms of something that you feel looks really stylish on you. And it sort of leaves them in this kind of no man's land, really. They've got the money to spend and the urge to spend it as well. They actually want to buy nice things to wear, but there's just nothing that's really grabbing them. And often the women that I've come across who are like this, they've got the kind of figure that the high street doesn't really cater to. You know, they've had a few children, fitness might have gone by the by for a few years because it's been focused on various different things, but they've still got an attractive figure. It's not that, but they're acknowledging that it's not the figure they had in their 20s. And so I suppose identity kind of comes into that a bit more. The other thing I've started recently, well, it's in the melting pot, it's going to hopefully be coming out soon, is a wardrobe streamlining service.
Oh, right.
Which particularly with women who have got mostly more into their 50s and their 60s, they've accumulated a lot of clothing, and still when they're going to go out for the day or go out for the evening, the bedroom is strewn with clothing, and she's like, I have nothing to wear and everything. And my aunt was getting this problem a lot. She's very petite, but very curvy. There's a lot of change over a small area, basically. And nothing really quite fits. It's all too long in the leg. It doesn't come in enough at the waist. And she's been spending money for years on clothing and nothing quite works. And so she decided to take a stand against this. And she said, Amy, I'm not going to be buying clothing anymore. I'm going to get you to make it instead. I've got a patron. Great. And quite a challenging one as well. But she comes down from Edinburgh for a few days and we have alteration holidays. And she sits usually where you are sitting now, and I'm on the sewing machine or at the cutting table. We try it on, we do a fitting, we do alterations, and put it back on and everything. As I say, I did this wardrobe streamlining service with her to sort of trial it out, really. It took the best part of 2 days, and she tried on every item of clothing she had. And we talked about it in terms of why she bought it, what she likes about it, does it fit as it is? If it doesn't fit, is it just a case of a small alteration and then it's a very useful item to have in the wardrobe? Or, and I suppose this is where identity comes in more, is it relevant for your life as it is now? Because you might have bought it when, you had an office job and it was important to be, sort of clean lines, very smart and everything. But in her case, she's retired now and everything. And I'm saying, is this relevant for your life now? When would you wear it within your day-to-day life that you have as we speak now? And quite often she was just, I don't think it has a role anymore. And there was nothing wrong with it. It hadn't worn out or anything, but it was just not relevant anymore. So we had keep, chuck and alter as the different piles. And it worked out very well. And even now when I talk to her, she said, it's totally changed. And she's been able to group things in terms of outfits, in what goes with what, and she can just go to the wardrobe, have a little rifle through and pick something out, and it's a lot less stressful. So that's a side of things which I'm wanting to develop, because I don't think Shu will be unique in terms of needing a little bit of help with that. Sometimes you just need someone to be ruthless and say, that looks horrible on you, chuck it out.
Yes.
They was a bit surprised at first, but they get round to it. Yeah.
No, that sounds great, because I imagine I would probably need something like that at some point. Or you just need somebody to go, that's not working for you.
No.
You know, or this is something you could do if you don't want to lose it, but
yes,
it might be time to say goodbye.
It might be time to say goodbye, yes. Or do something to make it then fit in.
Yes.
Really.
Altering clothes is something I've been trying to learn to do lately myself, because I've got so many clothes. Well, it's more my sister has had a lot of fluctuations in her weight, and I've had a lot of her clothes because they don't fit her anymore, but they don't quite fit me either.
Right.
And so I've been trying to do things to, elasticate waists so that they don't fall down all the time, because I don't like wearing belts, and just little things like that. It's a really useful, just having ideas for what you can do, the possibilities, that just because something's come off the rack, it doesn't mean it has to stay like that forever.
No, it doesn't. No. I've had a few things which I've sort of dramatically reworked, sometimes for myself. My mum found this beautiful Nicole Fari wool and silk skirt in a charity shop, and it was all cut on the bias and it flowed really nicely, but she bought it for me when I wasn't there. And it fit my waist okay, but it didn't quite fit my hips, really. And it never did. It never quite sat right. And the zip always rippled and everything a bit. And I sort of hid it with things and everything, because it was a nice skirt to wear. But the fit wasn't quite there. And it was, because it was a mass-produced item, there was no seam allowance. There was nothing I could let out to make it fit a bit better. Okay. And I ended up not wearing it, really. And it was a beautiful piece of fabric. And I thought, right, all my clothing has to earn its place in my wardrobe. It has to work hard, and anything that's slacking gets chucked out. Everything. Also, because I make clothing, and I make for myself as well, because often I am my best form of advertising. Really, is me walking around and stuff. If I've got to the point, if I want something new, something has got to go. If I'm not prepared to make that sacrifice, then I can't have something new.
Wow, that's a great way of doing it. Yeah.
Yes, because otherwise, wardrobes can just spread and spread and spread, and I live in a very small flat, and I will soon be living in an even smaller van, so large wardrobes is not an option, really. You've got to have those key items that work well, and in fact, in most ways, you don't even need a mirror. You can just put it on and go.
I suppose then that can take us on nicely to the issue of sustainability, because that's something you've been working really hard towards.
Yes.
I've been thinking a lot lately about clothing waste. I've become really fascinated by artists who use textiles in sculptural work. And that sort of thing. So there's an artist called Tal Lewis. She uses scrap denims and bits of clothing that people have thrown away, or from thrift stores and charity shops and stuff, and she'll use them to make really huge hand-sewn sculptures and quilts and things. And they're really incredible, and that they usually have some sort of message about clothing waste. There's a beautiful quilt that she did that's a seascape, that's a coral reef in it. Wow. So there's a really gorgeous message about clothing waste and polluting the oceans with things that we throw away, and using discarded clothing to do that.
Yes.
So there's that issue of clearing out your wardrobe, but what then do you do with the waste, the things that you don't want? Can they be used for something else? And also, how do we cut down in the first place? So that's a really good scheme that you have for yourself to, I'm not allowed new things until I am done with all of these things.
Yes.
So
definitely. Yes.
Do you have tips for people for how to do that?
You have to be ruthless about it if that's the route that you want to go, and not just think, oh well, just one little extra t-shirt won't make it too much, because it's never just one, it's two, it's three, it's four, it's a dress, it's a jacket, it's a coat, and suddenly your wardrobe is bursting at the seams. Wardrobe organisation, I think, helps a lot. I think there's been a number of people who do channels on this on YouTube, fitting things into small spaces usually and everything when you haven't got a lot of storage. But I think it's also quite good in terms of outfits, as I did with my aunt when we went through her wardrobe, putting things together so you can literally just go to it and you know what you would wear in that combination. Because 9 times out of 10 we tend to gravitate, you know, we'll have more than we actually wear, really, but we'll tend to gravitate to probably about a maximum of 10 outfits, I think, regularly. So my tip would be sort of be honest, you know, divide your wardrobe. What do you actually wear? What do you wear regularly? What is always in and out of the wash? And put that to one side. And then honestly look at what you have left. And yes, there'll be some pieces in there just that you think, oh yeah, I'll wear that for an occasion. So yeah, I should definitely have that. It's a very useful dress, but it's not something I'm wearing all the time. But you know, if I have weddings that come up, it's a fail-safe one. I know that's going to be a good one. But then you might have various items of clothing that have just been sitting there for quite some time, but you just don't really wear them. In which case, send them to charity, and someone else might instantly fall in love with them, and it's just the piece they've been wanting for their wardrobe. I believe there's also a scheme in this particular city. I think there's a few cities it goes on in. You can donate. I think it's linked to one of the charities. I think it's Shelter or something like that. And you can donate clothing directly to them, and they divide it up, basically clothing that you would wear for interviews quite a lot. And people who are homeless, who are looking for jobs and everything, and they get an interview, but they think, you know, I've got nothing to wear for interview. You can go to this particular warehouse and you can look through what they've got and put an outfit together and borrow that for the interview. And I thought that's a really good way of repurposing clothing that you might not wear anymore, rather than just putting it in a charity shop.
I think the West End Refugee Service might do something similar as well.
Yes.
Yeah. I think the last time I was here, I saw you had an amazing skirt that was put together from little scraps, little offcuts.
Ah, yes. My approach is sustainability. I see bespoke as very much a sustainable practice, because you are only making what a person commissions you for at that time. You're not making excess stock which is just going to sit there, not be sold and have to be repurposed in some way. I very much see that as a sustainable practice. But in addition to that, I am still making clothing, and you still get a lot of scrap and waste from that as well. So it was probably about 2 years ago I was noticing how much I was doing a lot of making sort of back to back, and I was noticing just how much there was in terms of offcuts. As a maker, you always end up with quite a lot of offcuts, but a lot does get thrown away. And I was making a lot of items in jersey fabric at that time as well. And I thought, there must be something I can do with this. And at the time I thought, I'll shove it into a bag and put it to one side and have a think, because I know there's something there, but I just haven't, you know, touched on it yet. And then I had an idea of making a zero waste textile, basically. So all these pieces would be put together, and you have to line them up correctly so that they all stretch in the same way and everything. It's quite arduous work, really. There's quite a lot that goes into it, which explains why the fashion industry doesn't do it, really, because they would have to charge so much for it. Whereas that's one of the advantages of doing bespoke, being a one-woman band. You know, I can take a bit more time to do these things, and then I can charge accordingly, because the joy of it is it's completely unique, and it changes all the time depending on what I'm making and what new scraps I'm making, and so that goes into the mix, and it's just this ever-changing organic textile. And then when I go to take a pattern piece to cut something out of it, like the dress you saw, for example, again, it's that sort of, I'm influencing the design process a certain amount, but so is the textile, and I tend to fold it in half to where I'm going to lay the pattern piece, lay it out, cut it out, and then it's quite, you get a little thrill, really, when you take the paper off and everything and fold out, and you see just where which colours have just, that's where they've hit in terms of where they'll be on the body. I don't tend to try and control that at all. Actually, no, not at all. I don't even place anything in particular. I just see where it's going to go.
It goes where it fits.
It goes where it fits, yes. Yeah. And actually, I think it was one of those things, if I did try to influence it, it would look a bit contrived. Whereas because I don't, and I make a point just stepping back, and that's just how it's going to be, you get some really amazing results. And I'm planning to do the same with fabric which is non-stretch as well, so I can make coats and jackets from that as well. And that's what my next collection's going to be. And it's called A-Wear.
Aware.
Yes. The idea of being aware of the waste that is produced and putting it to good use, not just discarding it and not taking responsibility, basically, for it. I think it's all our responsibility. It's all our duty to take responsibility for the waste that we all contribute to producing, because we are the consumers. All these things are being made for us. All the waste is being generated in order to provide us, frankly, with more variety than we really need.
Yeah,
I
totally.
think. Yes, I think particularly in our generation and everything, we have gotten used to far too much choice, much more than our parents had. And I think a lot of us are reluctant to give it up, really. I didn't come from a very wealthy background, so choice was always limited anyway, and finance was always limited too. So in a way, I'm not an atypical consumer. It's always been a bit frugal, and because it's been frugal for so long, that's just life, really. I think if I won the lottery tomorrow, it wouldn't stop me, going to vintage sales and all that sort of thing. I wouldn't have to worry about the rent, and that would be nice. But a lot of things I do which sort of minimise waste, they're more intrinsic to me and my identity rather than something I do because I haven't got the money. I think it's so drilled in now. I think I could let it go, really.
Oh, I understand that. That's great. And it's really important to remember those roots. No matter how successful you might become, it's really important to remember where you've come from. I always think about my mum when she was a child. She only ever wore things that my grandmother made for her, and that was so normal. And it's really not that long ago in history that that's what everybody did.
Yes.
And now it is too easy, that I suppose society of fast fashion, because I'm looking straight across at TK Maxx at the moment, sports director out beside it, not to advertise them, and the whole high street, right up Northumberland Street, you can go and get 3 t-shirts for a tenner somewhere, and how often are you going to wear them, as you say,
and who has had to pay a price along the way for you to have that cheap accessibility. It's sure as hell not going to be the big company that you're buying it from. They've made sure they're covered.
That's it. It could be some kid in Bangladesh or wherever. It's really important, and I suppose that's really why I wanted to talk to you so much, was because you're edging into that. But it's also fascinating from a design point of view, is that idea of the scrap pieces all coming together and making new fabric.
Yes, it's very enjoyable to work with. And it very much ties back to the textile being the primary influencer for me, really, in terms of what I make and how I make. It's always the fabric that catches my eye and everything. So it's very nice to be making a textile which is completely unique as well. I can't even recreate it again. Once that section of it is gone, I can't remake it at all. That's also something else which is quite key to my work as well. A genuine unique quality. I don't think I ever really repeat anything exactly, even for myself. There are a few styles which I've repeated, but I change things about them, or I change them according to what textile I'm using quite often as well.
And then I suppose that carries through into who it's even made for, because it's a different body every time, and even that body will change.
Yes. There is an aspect of discovering the wheel each time in some ways. You discover it a bit less the more you do it. I would say that's one of the things with bespoke. It's always new. It's a new person. It's a new body. It's a new fabric. It's a new style, which keeps it interesting, but sometimes it can be a bit challenging, especially when someone is determined to have something made in a fabric that is not suitable for it. And you're attempting to talk them away from it. So you cannot make that garment in that fabric and it work. It just won't. I can't force it to do something it won't want to do. It's very much like an oncoming tsunami. You're not going to win that one. If it's not going to do it, it's not going to do it. You will have to adjust or go to higher ground, whichever is appropriate.
I suppose on that, thank you. You were part of Northern Sustainable Fashion Revolution, is that right?
Yes, I was, yes. Yeah. That was very illuminating. I was one of the featured designers, and then I also went to a number of the talks, found out some very worrying things about viscose fabric production.
Oh, right.
Yes, I have now, since that lecture which I went to, which Louisa Rogers did, I've actually stopped buying viscose altogether, even though it is basically a natural product because it's made from beechwood quite often. The chemical processes that you have to go through in order to make the fibre into a quality that you can actually spin it and all this sort of of thing. It's very, very toxic both to the people who work with it and to waterways where the excess sort of chemical products tend to be disposed into. And they are trying to refine it and improve it, but it's one of those things that it's a slow process, and I imagine it's a challenge to find chemicals which will do what your old toxic chemicals will do, but without being quite so toxic, but you still need them to make a certain effect upon the raw fibre itself. So I can understand the industry having problems changing into sort of more sustainable practices. And with that in mind, I just decided maybe I'll just rule out this whole side of fabric altogether. And I much prefer a cotton jersey anyway, and wool jersey and silk jersey, that sort of thing anyway. The side of sustainability which I'm trying to build more in my practice is the fabrics which I source. Because at the moment, a lot of them that I've got are remaindered fabrics which I've either been given or I've found in fabric warehouses. But as they run out, I'm wanting to replace them with fabrics which I know for sure are sustainably produced, and across all their levels as well, because quite often they'll talk about the fibre going from the field and being made into yarn, and that's, you know, well considered, but in the process of it going from being yarn into a fully formed fabric, sometimes that area of the process can have been completely ignored in terms of sustainability and toxicity to both water and individuals as well, or animal cruelty can often come into that side of things as well. Getting it so it ticks all the boxes all the way along the line to the point that it arrives with you, my goodness, it takes a lot of research. It's proving quite challenging, and I'm coming to the conclusion that the easiest way to ensure that a lot of those boxes are ticked is to go with small production houses. There's one that I discovered just earlier this year. I went to a Future Fabrics Expo event in London with a friend who's another girl who was one of the featured designers in the Northern Sustainable Fashion Revolution, in order to sort of discover any sort of new fabrics which are coming out and everything which are more sustainable, because sometimes it can be quite hard hunting on the internet to actually find what you're looking for in that side of things. And I came across a company, it's a type of fabric called Bristol cloth, and it's all made within 12 miles of all the production areas are all within 12 miles of each other. So it's not being flown here and there and across the country and all that sort of thing, or even internationally. And a farm based outside of Bristol, and they provide the raw fleece. And then that is spun into yarn, and then it's taken to another company which dye it with all sort of natural vegetable dyes, and then it goes to a small weaving company in Bristol, and they weave it into the final cloth. And it's beautiful stuff. So I'm more going down that route of trying to bring as many new sustainable fabrics in, because also the more we buy them as well, the cheaper they'll get. At the moment, they're quite expensive, especially if they're being made in this country. It's got to be made with the wages in mind, which are applicable in this country rather than what is in the Far East, which is obviously cheaper. So yes, it is all quite expensive at the moment, you know, sort of £95 a metre. That's a lot, both for me and for me to put on to my customer. But the more that we buy it, the more that we endorse it, then the cheaper it will get. So that's sort of a route in terms of my textiles, which I'm wanting to move towards. Possibly even getting undyed textiles as well, dyeing them myself. That's the other side of things, which I'm looking into. But I'll have to go and do some courses, I think, on natural dyeing and fixing and all those aspects of it to make it viable. So it is interesting to always be increasing your training as well. I'm not sort of, I'm a designer and a maker and now I'm done with all that learning stuff and everything. No, definitely not. I will probably be learning until the day I drop. It will probably be with a pair of scissors in hand.
It's fascinating, because the more we learn about how all the systems work, the more horrifying it is, and the more you think, how can we break it? But it's, as you say, it's perseverance like anything. I am afraid that the core problem comes back to the core problem with everything, whether your subject matter is the environment, food, fashion, jobs, whatever it is. Problem is there are too many of us, and that is what makes all these industries so polluting, because they have to produce so much quantity in order to keep themselves both economically afloat and keep up with demand. There just are too many of us, really. That's it's the problem, irrespective of the subject area. We need to stop having babies, I'm afraid. Yes. Smash capitalism. Yes. I mean, capitalism has its benefits, but it's the whole system in place on a global level. Yes. And it's that is partly behind driving people having so many babies, because it's marketed as such a great thing, and then you have to buy all these many things for your babies for all this amount of time throughout their lives. And
yes, you do. And then babies will become workforce, and the cycle will repeat.
Exactly.
Yes.
So living smaller, I suppose. Thinking about prices and stuff. Because, you know, obviously there are so many people who can't afford very much, and that's where fast fashion has got its niche, because it's like fast food. You can have these things with handing over very little money, but if they only last a few weeks because you're having to wear them all the time and they don't really survive the wash. I mean, it's the sort of quality of clothes where the first couple of times you wash it, you can already see the wear on it.
Yes.
But it's so difficult for so many people to go that extra mile, to pay the extra money to get something that will really last for years.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah. It's a cultural difference as well, really, because we've been brought up with so much choice. And yes, it's been too cheap for too long, really. People think, well, that's what it costs. I'm like, no, it's really not. If that same t-shirt that you've just paid £3 for was made in this country, if both the textile was made in this country and the t-shirt was cut and put together and finished in this country, you'd be paying significantly, probably about 5 times more for it. It's a false economy, really, in that respect.
It might be nice to talk a little bit about your marketing and how you market your work, because you mentioned earlier that you often are doing it by wearing it, and you're in a lot of the photographs of your work. And my first encounter with you was during the late shows, and you did something rather beautiful where you had a couple of dancers modelling your clothes.
I did, yes. Yeah. One of my other passions is Argentine tango, and for that particular event I thought it would be a nice way to bring people in. Also, designing dance wear is a little bit different to designing day-to-day wear. You have to take different things into account and everything in terms of comfort and movement, so it's a slightly different aspect to clothing as well. My marketing's a little bit patchy in places. Like many creative types, it's the side which they either are not interested in or don't really know how to go about starting with. I would say I'm sort of a mixture of those two things. I do wear my own stuff, so yes, I am very much my own advertising. I permanently have business cards on me, and a lot of building my business's profile over the last few years has been people saying, I love what you're wearing, where did you get it? And I go, I made it, this is me, this is what I do, and everything. It's helped to spread the word. I mean, I started the Artwear Emporium in 2012 when I was working as a costume technician for Cumbria University. And it's the most steady wage I'd ever had, and I had enough space, and I thought, right, I'm going to do this, I'm going to make it official in terms of HMRC, you know, I'm going to be a real person, you know, with tax and all that sort of thing. It's taken a long time to grow it in that respect. And also with the advent of social media coming up as well. In some ways I was reluctant with some of it. I was mainly using Facebook for quite some time with it. I just recently ventured onto Instagram. So many people had been saying to me, oh, you have to get on Instagram and everything. And I thought, oh, I'm going to have to bite the bullet, aren't I? And that means I'm going to have to get a smartphone. Ooh, shuddering at the idea. Still to this day, nobody has that number for that smartphone. It's as though it does not exist. It is merely a mini computer because there is no other way I can get onto Instagram, so I have to have it. It serves its purposes, but it is not going to pervade my life and turn me into someone who is constantly absorbed by a screen, because that annoys me somewhat. A number of times you're sitting on the metro these days and you look in front of you and it's just a long line of people absorbed in various different sized screens with headphones in. Makes me want to sort of throw little things at them to see if they notice, because they seem so in a trance, as though you're not going to get them out of it at all. But yes, I am starting to get into social media a bit more, and actually Instagram hasn't been as horrible as I was expecting it to be in some ways. It has in fact helped me to connect with a whole range of people around the globe, you know, people sort of following me from, you know, America and Australia and China, and it's like, wow, you know, I wouldn't really have come across people in that same way. Without that, and various things. I started using Twitter a bit more as well, and I thought, how does all this hashtag lark work and everything? So I was trying some things. I was like, oh, this that's how it all works. And that's how I found out about the Future Fabrics Expo event that I went to in London. I found out about it through Twitter and through the company who launched it, called The Sustainable Angle. And I thought, oh, this is interesting. Oh, when's this? Oh my goodness, it's a week away. I'm not going to be able to afford the train fare and everything. But it turned out it was quite cheap. And I got onto my friend Hannah as well. And I said, shall we go for it? And she said, yes, which was awfully surprising. Usually she did us a bit more about decisions like that. I was like, no, we're going to London next week. Oh my goodness, this is a bit sudden, really. But no, it was a very interesting event, found out a lot more there, I had a chance to network more as well. Yes, it's just finally getting to that point that it's tipping over, and I think it was a couple of years ago, I felt it really sort of start to change, where a friend that I know very well, her daughter-in-law-to-be specifically asked for me to make her wedding dress.
Right,
and that was the first time that it hadn't been someone directly connected to me. It was one step removed, and it was someone specifically asking for me. I didn't have to do any sort of promotional marketing to get it and everything, and I thought, oh, this might be just starting to change a little bit. And about 18 months ago I managed to secure some funding as well, because the problem I was having was I was working in the bridal industry part-time, and then I was doing Artwear Emporium part-time as well. And it was though it was a rocket kind of hovering just off the ground, but it didn't have enough, propulsion to really get it to fly. I just got it off the ground, but it wasn't going to go anywhere until I could plough the full 5 to 6, 7 day week into it, really, to get it to really move. A family member said, well, I'll fund you for 2 years, and so you don't have to worry about the bills or anything, and you can plough your time into promoting it and taking on more commissions because you've got the time to do so. And then I could save that money, and then once the funding runs out, then I can start living on it. So I always have at least a year's worth of income kind of in hand while I'm working on making the income for the following year. I mean, it's still a little bit on a knife edge, but it seems the only sort of viable way that I can live doing what I want to do as well, rather than having to sacrifice so much time just to make ends meet, which I think is a problem my generation is kind of having quite a lot at the moment. The amount of time that has to be ploughed into just being able to make ends meet in that way.
And that affects your creativity so much as well.
It does. It's surprising how well rested you have to be creative. And the number of people who think, well, you could just go and do it, just like I go and do my office job. Like, not so much. If only, in some ways, it would be much easier. But some days you're just not in the right mindset for it, or you're overtired, and you really can't be creative when you're overtired either, or there's just other things buzzing around your brain which boring things like admin or laundry or things you just need to get done and out of the way before you feel you can relax and process and concentrate on that. Sometimes I need a little snooze in the middle of the day. I call it a creative snooze. Sometimes I need to knock out my conscious brain and let my subconscious sort of work through things. I sometimes do that when I'm trying to work out how to do a design. I've got it in my mind, but I'm not quite sure how to translate it into 3 dimensions because it's a bit complex, and I find that can make a big difference.
Yeah. What about the name Artwear Emporium? Because there's a suggestion of wearing art and actually being quite bold about saying, I make art that people wear.
Yes, well, I decided on that after, in fact, Artwear is a area of clothing. It was very much inspired by the arts and crafts movement and William Morris and all that side of things. I think he was the one who famously said, you should have nothing in your life that you do not know to be beautiful or believe to be useful. And I thought, yes, actually, or preferably both, if you can get both in the one item, I would have thought. At the time when he and all the guys were doing their thing and everything, their wives were sort of exploring different sort of sides of fashion much more. It's not talked about a lot, but I would say that's very much the root of artwear as such. At a time where bespoke was the norm, you had everything which was made to measure for you and everything. And you get some beautiful historical textiles from around that time too, both made in this country and then also imported. But I decided to adopt it from the point of view of doing bespoke and the idea of making something which is unique and really stands out, because a lot of the women who I was talking to at the time, it was not only that stuff didn't fit, they were just bored with what they were looking at. Nothing was really grabbing their attention in the way that, you know, you're walking along and you get loads of little boutiques and you go, ooh, that's nice, or anything. You know, they weren't getting that wow factor anymore. They weren't getting something that really turns their head, either for the cut or for the textile, for whatever reason. Yes, I wanted to bring that into the design of the samples, which I do. And often I use samples in order to inspire people in terms of what they might like for themselves. It was a few years ago I made a dress for one of my collections, and my mum was the inspiration for it. She often used to say, oh, you know, when you've got parties going on in the summer and it's nicer weather and everything, I never know what to wear. Everything's always too strappy and she doesn't want her arms out, or it's too short and she prefers something long. So it was always sort of a pain, really. And I thought, right, if I was going... She didn't commission me to do this, but she was the inspiration for this design. I thought, right, a summer dress which covers your arms, is a nice neckline to show off a necklace, a bold necklace, because she likes her bold jewellery, is full length, but doesn't feel really formal because it's full length. And I came up with a design which I call the pick-up dress, because it's a very long dress, and then you pick up areas of it and then you sew them, so you get loads of areas and you get loads of interesting ruching details as well, which for an older figure, if there's anything that you want to draw attention away with that particular figure, it's a very good technique to use. So you can have a few extra ruches around the stomach area if they're just like, oh, I don't like my tummy or anything. Or if they, say, haven't got as much of a curvy bum as they would like, you can put a few more ruches around it. It's just like, I will invent you a bum with this dress. You have more bum than it would seem, necessarily. They go, oh, yes, I have more bum. Which then, and a lot of it's to do with illusion work as well, because if you make your bum look more curvy, it makes your waist look more narrow as a result. So yeah, sort of playing with that. It's really interesting. A lot of designs come out of that too.
Do you find it's quite an empowering thing to give women especially back a bit of control over how their body can look to other people through their clothes?
Yes, very much so, yes. Especially if they're a bit tentative at first, when you sort of help them and guide them along, and then they turn up for their first fitting and they see the item of clothing on the stand and they go, ooh, it looks even nicer than I thought it was. I was a little bit nervous at one point, but actually it really, really works. I'm like, yes, I know, I knew it would. Yeah, I think it empowers them quite a bit more when they can have an influence over what they choose for themselves and guiding them into choosing it for their lifestyle as well. They often seem quite relieved at the end of it to be just like, oh, finally got something I know is going to work and I know it looks nice on me and I don't have to keep glancing in the mirror and thinking, does this actually work or does it not? So yeah, it's very satisfying when you package something up for someone which you've been making for them for usually quite some time. It takes quite some time to make something completely from scratch and everything. And all the fittings involved and the finishings and all that sort of thing. But they go out the door with it and they're happy with it. And in some ways you're relieved to never have to see it again as well, because usually you've been looking at it for far too long. And you like it in theory, but you're just tired of looking, I need something new.
Just what's come into my head, where do you stand on pockets in women's clothing? Are pockets a thing that you do?
I have a mixed relationship with pockets. Obviously, when you're doing menswear, they're often quite key. And when I've been doing menswear as well, the men often say, and I want the pockets nice and deep. Oh, goodness me, I've probably got pocket bags down to your knees, you know. Why do you have to put so much things in them? But actually, a lot of the women which I've made for, they don't like pockets. Really? They don't like the line of it. I think most of them would agree that they're very useful, but they don't like how it sort of distracts from the eye and takes away from that smooth silhouette. With some things, I end up sort of bullying them into having pockets, really, in some ways, because especially with more sort of classic tailoring, it doesn't look right without them. Something's missing. You wouldn't believe what a transforming effect belt loops have on a pair of trousers.
Right.
Yes, tiny little loops. And it doesn't look like a real pair of trousers until you've got the belt loops on. I was astonished. Just like little strips of fabric. And even if you don't wear a belt with them,
they need to be there.
Yes, they really do need to be there. It's a strange thing, that. Unless you're doing sort of very like Spanish-style matador trousers, you know, which I quite like. You don't need belt loops for that.
I think that's my dream, is to have really massive skirts so I can just put deep pockets into.
Oh,
and
right.
the pockets are hidden away somewhere in there.
Well, that's actually quite interesting. You should say that as quite a period feature. In fact, when you get 18th century dresses and they've got the underskirts and then you've got the bodice and then the skirt goes down the back, they would have had a little pocket on the inside and everything. And it was tied in, it wasn't sewed in. But yes, so they did have pockets at that point. Yeah.
There's this dress that Betty Davis wears in All About Eve. It's a party gown, but it's like a shirt at the top and this big skirt, sort of wide, long skirt with really deep pockets. And she just looks so boss, you know, she's just so ace.
Yes.
Lounging around. She got this really gorgeous figure at the top and then this big skirt with hands in the pockets and she's bossing everybody around. And it's
yes. I think I know the one you mean, yes. Definitely.
That would be my dream.
Your dream dress, would it? Yes. Well, it can be arranged.
I'll have to save up a bit first.
Possibly, yes. But it will be to your measurements and in the fabric of your choice.
Because
What's he said for that?
It must be fascinating working with so many different body shapes as well and trying to work with them rather than against them.
Yes.
That's really lovely about what you do too. Because I just find I'm quite short in the torso but quite long in the legs.
Yes.
And I need a different size in my bust, in standard sizes in the bust and hips and waist and things, and it's just awkward to try and, like you were saying earlier, to try and get clothes to fit because we don't have standardised bodies. We just have bodies.
I know, it's ridiculous having standardised sort of clothing sizes, really.
And everybody feels like crap all the time.
Yes. And it ends up that women place a lot of store on a number.
Yeah.
A number that doesn't really mean anything.
Yeah.
You notice it a lot in the bridal industry. The boutique which I was working at, which I just left a couple of years ago, the sales girls, they would measure the brides and everything, and then they'd say, right, well, you're coming up as this size for this brand. And the look of horror on the face of the brides, and you had to say, no, it's American sizing, it's American sizing. The number seems big, but it's the equivalent of this in our sizing. But sometimes some brides would get really hooked up on it and say, no, I want the smaller dress. So it's not going to fit you. You know, and there's not often very much room to let things out.
It's not a day where you would want to be uncomfortable.
No.
Surely, if you're wearing something and everybody's looking at you, you need to be comfortable, and surely that should matter more than
the number which is on the tag, which no one will ever see. You could cut it out. They'd never know.
They wouldn't know.
No.
Exactly. You can just
what they will
them.
remember is whether you look, as you say, whether you look comfortable in your dress and everything, and you're enjoying wearing it, or you know, everything's digging in, and you can't wait until you can get the damn thing off.
Because it's a presentation
issue
as well. It's how you feel in your body, and then how that exudes out. Well, I've kept you quite a bit. Is there anything else you would like to talk about?
Maybe just to add that the Artwear Emporium will be featuring on Wardrobe of Tomorrow, which is a new sustainable fashion marketplace, which has just launched at the end of August.
Great, yes.
And they've got various big names on board. Stella McCartney's one of the main ones, really. Right. She's also, I believe she's one of the main backers as well for it. Yes, for people who are interested in sustainable fashion and want to incorporate more of it into their lives, but the idea of doing extensive amounts of research to find something puts them off. This is an ideal site to be able to go to, and you can shop by categories as well. So there's categories like limited edition, bespoke, artisan, vegan, upcycling, so various different things. So you can choose a category and you can shop by that, and they have vetted all the designers which they put on their site, so you can be confident you're buying something which is genuinely sustainable, which is, I think it's a good move in towards making sustainable fashion more available, not something that you have to spend hours and hours of research attempting to hunt down. The Artwear Emporium will be featuring on that in due course. I'm not sure when.
Brilliant.
But in the next few weeks, put it out there.
Fantastic.
Yes.
I'll try and look for links by the time this will be coming out.
Yes.
Should be in a few weeks' time, so hopefully
it might time quite well.
Match up.
Yes.
And we'll get some.
Yes, it's just wardrobeoftomorrow.com.
Great. And if anybody wants to look at your website?
Yes, that is www.theartwearemporium.com.
Great.
And that's got my current collection on, and in a few weeks we'll have my new zero waste collection on as well.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And you mentioned you're on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Is it, if people search for the Artwear Emporium, they'll find you?
They will find me, yes.
Brilliant.
That is right.
Amy Jones, can't thank you enough. It's been a lovely afternoon.
It has
In
indeed.
your gorgeous studio.
Yes.
Overlooking Newcastle city centre.
And it's not pouring with rain, which is an advantage.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You've been listening to Audiovisual Cultures with me, Paula Blair, and my special guest, Amy Jones. This episode was recorded and edited by Paula Blair. The music is Common Ground by Airtone, licensed under Creative Commons Attribution 3.0 and available for download from ccmixter.org. If you like the show and find its contents useful and interesting, please help cover production and distribution costs by donating to paypal.me/PEA Blair or liberapay.com/PEA Blair. This will help keep the podcast ad-free. Episodes are released every other Wednesday. Please rate, share and subscribe on your chosen listening platform, as this helps others find the show. For more information, visit audiovisualcultures.wordpress.com and follow AV Cultures on Twitter and Facebook. Thanks for listening and catch you next time.